In this lesson, we're going to look at an introductory web app so that we have context. We're going to examine this web app in detail, look at the code, talk about how to deploy it, talk about the requirements to get it up and running and so forth, and later on we'll refine it. But for now, the web app basically provides us with some context, something that we can talk about. The web app is deliberately simple, but it does contain all of the realistic features of a real-world production-grade web app. So as you can see, I have my browser open. I happen to be using Chrome, but any modern browser should do. And the browser is displaying a very simple form, and the form wants me to enter a temperature. It's going to be understood as a Fahrenheit temperature. So let me just do 123.34. I can hit return. That's going to cause a request to go back to my web server and my web app. It does the conversion. It's very, very fast, as you can see. I'm not actually going over a network. I'm on my local machine. And my response page has a little hyperlink, so I can do it again. So I'm back to my form. Let's do -40, because that's the same in both scales. So you can see -40 in Fahrenheit is also -40 in centigrade or Celsius. And I can run this basically indefinitely. So what I have in summary is a two-page web app. There's an input form that a user fills out, 9876, submits, and then there's a response page that contains the answer, if you like, together with a hyperlink. Let me now go to my Emacs editor. I have a very simple text document. It's called firstwebapp.txt. By the way, this file, together with the deployed web app file, which is called temp.war, the war stands for Web Archive. It's just a jar file. We'll get into details later. Those are in a zip file together for convenience, and that's called firstwebapp.zip. So let me run through the steps. There are 8 of them altogether. I start with step 0 because that happens behind the scenes. You don't see that. On my MacBook Pro, which is this machine, I've installed Tomcat, I've started Tomcat, and I've deployed the war file, temp.war. We picked up the example at step 1, where I open up the browser and I enter the appropriate URL. I show that down below here, but we'll get into details a bit later. This is just for reference. I enter the appropriate URL, which causes the browser to send a request over to Tomcat, and Tomcat responds with my input form, input.html, which is, of course, the traditional name for a welcome page. I have, by the way, information in this deployed war file up here that tells Tomcat that input.html is the appropriate page to send back in case the user doesn't specify anything. Again, this is a detail that we'll analyze carefully later. In any case, once the input.html is sent down to the browser, the user fills in the text box and submits, basically hits the button or hits return. In step 4, another request goes back to Tomcat. This contains the input data, so I'm assuming here -37.6 or whatever. The application on the server side then performs the so-called business logic, the application logic. In this case, of course, very simple. All it does is converts a temperature, generates a response page, which is sent back to the browser, which displays it. And of course, the response page contains a hyperlink, so we can go all the way back to step 1 and keep going indefinitely. So this first web example is going to provide us some context. In forthcoming lessons, what we'll do is analyze the code, talk about deployment, we'll talk about installing Tomcat, and all of that. But for now, let's take a short break.